I was still holding my morning coffee when four bulky guys in crooked HOA security polos marched up to my gate and tried to order me off my own land. 10 minutes later, those same guys were sprinting back to their trucks in pure panic as a dozen Harley-riding veterans, my cousins and their brothers in arms, rolled over the ridge like a thunderstorm. And when Karen, the HOA president, realized her security team had abandoned her, she stood alone in a cloud of dust, screaming threats no one believed anymore. That was the moment her entire empire cracked. I never thought moving to the mountains meant dealing with an HOA warlord, but that's exactly how this started. My name's Ethan Miller, 38, and all I wanted was peace. Fresh pine air, a wood-burning stove, coffee on my porch, and no one telling me what color my damn mailbox should be. I bought a cabin on private land way outside Pinecrest Estates, the kind of place where the only rules are set by nature. For months it was perfect quiet mornings, long hikes, the kind of silence that fixes parts of you that you didn't even know were broken. But apparently, nothing makes a certain type of person angrier than watching someone live free. That certain type in my story was Karen Hillard. Karen lived just down the bend in a shiny McMansion that looked like a showroom car had exploded into a house. She was the kind of woman who clutched a clipboard like it was a weapon, believed bylaws were sacred scripture, and thought her HOA had jurisdiction over everything from the clouds to the dirt under my boots. Even though my cabin wasn't part of the HOA, she acted like I'd personally insulted her entire bloodline by existing outside her bubble of control. At first it was petty. Notes under my gate saying my unpainted fence lowered community value. Letters claiming my chainsaw disrupted neighborhood harmony. Flyers demanding I pay HOA dues I legally didn't owe. I burned every one of those letters in my wood stove. It should have ended there. But Karen wasn't the kind of person who accepts no. She was the kind who hears no and thinks, "Oh, you just challenged me." That morning, everything exploded, started like any other. The cabin was warm from the fire I lit at dawn. Bacon sizzled on the skillet. My cousins Jake and Mark, both former Army, both built like men carved out of oak, were still asleep after a long night of whiskey and card games. I stepped outside onto the porch, cradling my coffee mug, breathing in that cold mountain air that makes you feel like the world is finally slow enough for you to catch up. Then I heard engines, not the deep, proud rumble of Harley engines you feel in your bones. These were clunky, uneven pickup trucks with mufflers that sounded like they'd been held in place by hope and duct tape. 3 of them pulled up across my gravel driveway, forming some kind of blockade, like they were reenacting a low-budget military raid. Doors opened, and out climbed 4 men dressed in black polos with HOA security stitched in uneven thread across their chests. Badges you could buy in bulk online. Sunglasses straight from a gas station rack. Tattoos crawling up their necks. The kind of guys who confuse intimidation with cheap theatrics. And right behind them came Karen. Red suit, high heels, clipboard, smirk. The holy trinity of suburban dictatorship. One of the men puffed up his chest and barked, "Open the gate. We have authority here." I almost spit my coffee. Authority where I called back. On my land. Karen strutted forward like she was leading a SWAT team. "You're in violation of multiple HOA bylaws, Ethan. Illegal construction, unauthorized occupancy. This cabin shouldn't even be here." I stared at her, confused and amused at the same time. "Karen, this isn't HOA land. I own every inch of this property. You're trespassing." But she doubled down. They always do. Her clipboard snapped open like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. HOA jurisdiction extends to environmental impact zones. And your cabin, your very presence, is lowering property value. My security team has full authority to remove you. One of the men grabbed my gate and rattled it like he expected the lock to magically fear him into opening. Another cracked his knuckles like we were about to duel behind a saloon. For the first time that morning I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not fear exactly, but anger. The kind that comes from watching someone step over every line you clearly drew. I put my coffee down slowly. "You don't have a warrant. You don't have permission. You have no authority here. So unless you plan on mowing my grass while you're at it, I suggest you all back off." Karen's face twisted, her voice leaping 2 octaves. I will evict you. These men have the right to enforce my rules. Enforce. They looked like they could barely enforce a pizza delivery route. But the thing is, intimidation works when you're alone. When it's just you facing down 4 guys who clearly came here to scare you into submission, your brain does weird things. It tells you maybe you're wrong. Maybe you misunderstood something. Maybe it's easier to give in than fight. And I won't lie. For a moment I felt it. That tiny crack of doubt. That voice whispering, is this worth it? Should I pack up and go? Am I really ready to go to war with an HOA lunatic who has nothing to lose? I stood there on that porch, staring at these men blocking my driveway, and for a few seconds I felt small. Like maybe I had picked a battle I wasn't big enough to fight. Then the cabin door creaked open. Jake stepped out first, 6'4", shoulders like barn beams, half asleep and still intimidating. Right behind him was Mark, shorter but wider, rubbing his eyes like he'd woken from hibernation. What's going on? Jake asked. Karen pounced instantly. Perfect witnesses. These men are trespassing. They're violating HOA law. Mark blinked, unimpressed. Lady, this is his property. That is irrelevant, Karen shrieked. The HOA has jurisdiction. Jake looked the security team up and down. Mismatched uniforms, crooked badges, nervous shifting, and said, You boys look like mall cops who lost your Segways. That's when everything shifted. The air thickened. The fake security guys stiffened like they'd been insulted by someone who actually mattered. Karen whipped around, ordering them to move in, remove him, but none of them budged. And just as the tension reached its breaking point, we all heard it, a faint rumble, low, rhythmic, rolling through the valley like a storm that climbed out of the earth. Karen froze. The security guys straightened up, confused. Jake grinned. Sounds like the cavalry. Mark cracked a smile. Right on schedule. Karen tried to brush it off. Probably just locals, but I knew better. I sipped my coffee and said, Not locals, Karen. Family. The rumble grew louder, deeper, echoing through the trees until the gravel under our feet trembled. Dust rose on the ridge. Sunlight hit chrome in sharp flashes. Then they appeared. 12 Harley-Davidsons cresting the hill in formation. Black leather. Military patches. Boots hitting the ground like synchronized thunder as they parked in a perfect line across the road. The security guys went pale. One whispered, Oh, hell no. The riders killed their engines. Silence hit harder than the roar ever did. The man leading them, my cousin Danny, pulled off his helmet, scanning the scene with a soldier's calm. What's going on here? He asked. Karen pointed at me like a furious toddler tattling in kindergarten. These bikers are trespassing. This is HOA territory. Danny raised one eyebrow. Funny. Looks like private land to me. Karen sputtered. I have bylaws. Another rider stepped forward, towering over her. Sweetheart, the only thing you have is a caffeine addiction and a clipboard. Nothing here belongs to you. Karen turned purple. Danny took one slow step toward the security team. You boys here to bully civilians? Or did she not tell you this isn't HOA property? The leader swallowed hard. We're just enforcing compliance. Compliance, Danny echoed. With fake badges. On land that isn't yours. Mark added, I've seen Girl Scouts with more authority. One of the fake officers cracked first. I'm not paid enough for this, he muttered, heading for his truck. The others followed like dominoes falling. Karen shrieked, Cowards, all of you are fired. Danny smiled. Fired from what pretending? Then he gave a subtle nod, and the riders fired their Harleys again. The engines roared like a wall of sound. Dust exploded into the air. Gravel rattled. The security men sprinted to their trucks and peeled out so fast they nearly fishtailed into trees. Karen stood alone in the dust storm, hair wild, clipboard trembling. I raised my mug. Guess your army went AWOL. She had no comeback, no troops, no power left. She backed toward her SUV, stumbling, tripping over her own heel, and sped off down the road so fast the dust cloud followed her like a shame parade. That's where most people think the story ends. But Karen wasn't done. 2 days later, a crisp white envelope appeared in my mailbox with a $750 fine for unlawful motorcycle noise disrupting community ambiance. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee again. I pinned that letter right above my fireplace like a trophy. Neighbors came by with casseroles, wood beer, and stories about how Karen had bullied everyone for years. They thanked me for standing up when nobody else did. Karen drove past my driveway one evening, slowing down just long enough to glare through her tinted window. I lifted my mug in salute. She sped up like she'd been hit with a truth she didn't want to face. And I realized something then. People like Karen don't actually have power. They survive on fear, on silence, on the hope that you'll back down just to keep the peace. But the moment you stand firm, really stand, everything they built crumbles. Bullies don't lose because you out-yell them. They lose the second you stop being afraid.